Hey, Jeff Moody here. Jeff Moody MD, jeffmoodymd.com. I am so thrilled to be doing this Burnout Breakthrough live stream with my buddy and awesome guy, Dr. Jason Spears, who is really, really awesome. And he has been a big help to me personally because he's helping my kids get into medical school. Smart guy, went to Northwestern for undergrad, graduate school at both BU and Harvard. You know, this guy just is kicking it, and graduated from med school. He's now the big DR. I mean, what can I say? This guy's the bomb. So we are super psyched to have him here. Clearly, you know, my focus is burnout, but I want to make sure that we're hitting all of the, the populations of people who either have or could become exposed to burnout. And, you know, Jason, you know the statistics. Basically, virtually no percent of medical students enter medical school burned out. And by the time they leave, it's kind of like 30 to 60% have some form of burnout. And there's a few percent that have, you know, thought about suicide. So it's, to me, unfortunately, it starts early. And I feel like I hope we can partner to help medical students learn ways to deal with burnout before it happens, and then also, you know, kind of kick its butt, you know, if it starts to kick in. And I'm thrilled to have you here. And I always like to, first of all, tell anybody, if you're watching, start a watch party. We'll try to get this message out, get Jason's message out to help people get into medical school. And, you know, if you can do that, that would be awesome. And Jason, tell me what it is you do, and if you've seen some burnout in your students and your clients, and what you've been doing to try to help them, I guess.
All right, perfect, Dr. Moody. That was a stellar, very impressive introduction. I got to stand on the ladder. How high you put me up there.
Well, you're up there, baby. You're up there.
I really appreciate that and everything. So I guess I can kind of give a unique perspective because I'm newly graduated from medical school. So I see that side of things. I see like, okay, this is what's going on when people are doing the residency route and then even in medical school, and a lot of the burnout with that. And even when I was in medical school, was it third year on my psych rotation, the residency director, I did a presentation with him on burnout because that was a topic that he was interested in. And you're right about the thing when you come into medical school, you're not burnt out. You're excited.
Wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, and you're like, let's go, I'm going to be a doctor.
I'm going to be a doctor. I just got to study hard and everything like that. And then you just basically get beat down in the system, unfortunately. And you're like the lowest person at the totem pole. And so it can be burnt out because you're always trying to prove yourself to somebody, and the people above you just have more knowledge and experience because they're doing it longer than you. And so that can be very stressful. And even just a thing about, as a medical student, you're trying to get into a residency, and so there's a lot of demands on you to perform academically during the first 2 years for your board exams. And then even clinically, when you're in a hospital, there's a lot of pressure on you because you have a patient directly in front of you who you're interacting with. And then your attending is going to ask you questions about that. And then even when you're in residency, it's like, okay, you are no longer a medical student. You are the doctor.
Now you're the boss, you know, you got to be
we're going to hold you to a higher standard, and you're just juggling a lot more. And so people in medicine, I think just generally, we're kind of type A personalities, a little bit perfectionist. So we're always holding ourselves to extremely high standard, even if others don't hold us to that standard. Just personally and innately, that's where we're at. And so you have to really kind of be aware of things. And for me personally, I consider myself to be in shape just physically and everything. I exercise, run, and all of that. I kept that up in med school. However, I realized in med school, I am a stress eater.
Okay. There you go.
So undergrad, not really burnout. didn't gain like what is the freshman 15, did not happen. Got to medical school and then got to clinical rotations, talking about again all that stress and pressure, having your patient load, having to present, and I
And then it's a time thing too. I think it's like you don't have time. You're like eating on the run. Next thing you know, you had like a donut and a 2-day-old tuna fish sandwich is all you had in the last like 24 hours. You're starving.
Exactly.
Your body's running on like fumes. Yeah.
So that's something I think you just need to be. So I obviously became aware of like, okay, I'm a stressed eater, so I need to do something to change that. And then you need to be like, okay, what is causing me to be stressed out? What are some things that I can do differently? And one of the things, exercise is a good way to relieve stress. You have to kind of build that into your schedule. And for some people, you just like with medicine, you just don't know what's going to happen. So for some people, they say like if you're working a 9 to 5, it's like, okay, you're going to either go to the gym in the morning or you're going to go to the gym after work or whatever. And one of the things you can do to make sure that happens is pack your bag the night before. But in medicine, you just don't know what's going to happen. So you kind of need to schedule it in that you're going to do it and make sure you're committed to it and not think of it as, oh, it's taking away from something else that I can do, but actually think about it. This is your self-preservation, your prescription to happiness and to reduce your level of burnout is kind of how I look at it.
That is, Jason, that is like, did you write my book for me? I mean, you could have written the book, I tell you. Like, you said 3 very important things. Number 1, you have to be aware. And I was kind of talk to my clients and my friends who are kind of saying they're a little burned out. I'm like, it's a 12-step program. The first step is realizing you have a problem, and you are unbelievably knowledgeable in that yeah, you have to do that. You have to aware you have a problem. Number 2, you're like, what things did I kind of do to make myself better? And number 3, you actually have to do it. You can think about it. You can think about eating better. You can think about exercise. It doesn't matter unless you actually do it. So you want to come work with me, full time?
Sure, right?
Down. That is awesome. And that's, to tell you the truth, that's why you're not burned out, because you know yourself and you took the steps to prevent it. So A+.
I'm gonna bring in something that people don't consider too. Is I think in medicine too, a lot has changed where it's a lot of checking the boxes. You have that insurance, bureaucracy, and all of that, the red tape. And so you would know more about the changes than me. And they're like, okay, I went into medicine and I'm just seeing all of these changes from when I initially started my career in practice to what it is now, where it's all about the time. You have administrators, they're always about metrics that physicians need to meet, and then they're worried about that. I know when I was in some of my rotations, the physicians, they would say like, oh yeah, so I'm going to be in clinic, I'm going to do this work, but then when I get home, I have to do all my paperwork.
I tell you, one of the things I talk about a lot in the book, and then as you get farther along, you're going to find this too. EMR has like sucked all of the extra time out of your day, or if you are not doing EMR during the day, you end up doing it at home. That's called pajama time. I kind of personally, like, I can't do that. Like, I can only work when I'm at work, and then I want to, be done when I get home. And it's very stressful, and I end up spending more time at work. And like something that used to take me 30 minutes to document all my interactions now probably takes an hour and a half, and that's with offloading most of the tasks. So it's unbelievable. It's an unbelievable time sink and I can go on and on about that, but it's been, I think, very damaging. And I've done lots of talks, and when I give talks, I survey the audience. 100% of the audience would say the most stressful, kind of most impactful bad thing in their day is the EMR. Like not seeing patients, not doing life-saving surgery, not, deciding, in the ER who gets intubated or whatever. None of that. It's the EMR that is the 100% basically worst part of their day. So, that's, we talk a lot about it in the book, and I'm sure you'll get there too, where you think about what ways can we improve or mitigate the impacts of EMR on you as a person and on your day. So yeah, I want to just hang on for 1 second. If you can, click on over to my website, click on over to Jeff Moody on Facebook. You can start a live stream there and a watch party there. It's, let's get the message out that it's okay to be burned out. And there are smart people like Jason who already figured it out. Look at this. He's already got it all figured out. And us to help you. So thrilled about that.
Exactly. And I think with that, physicians need to realize like there are resources out there and people who are experienced who like, there's a lot of physicians like, you know what? I did the majority of my time in clinical practice, and now I kind of segued into something else. And one of the features like you're doing at jeffmoody.com is sharing ways that you can mitigate the burnout that you're having. And so if somebody is in a position where they feel burnt out or just feel they're going down that road, they need to know that there's resources available to help them in a system where
I 100% agree, Jason. That's a great point. The thing that I feel like med school, like pre-med, med school, even residency, but really more med school, it's a very solitary thing because to a certain extent you're competing against yourself, you're competing against other people for certain residency spots. And, it kind of breeds maybe a little bit of this Lone Ranger mentality. And I know a lot of med schools are trying to counteract that. I know the med school where I went to, they actually put each of the classes as kind of like a house, like in Harry Potter. So like Gryffindor, they give them all names and that house does things together. They do a lot of community activities. That particular med school even has like tracks where you can go into like a business of medicine track. You can go into a research of medicine track. So they're kind of like trying to tailor I guess they're trying to integrate things more and then also trying to tailor it so people can kind of subspecialize a little bit in their interests while they're in medical school. So I think that helps maybe decrease some of that competitiveness because you're all kind of going on your own path, so to speak, and you're not necessarily directly competing against somebody else. So,
cool. Yeah, that's very true. I think that really helps the cause out. But then, unfortunately, you have the other side of it. Like, okay, I'm not competing against my classmates, but what about the other guy at the other medical school who wants the same specialty?
Doing the same thing, right?
And so people need to be aware of that as well too, and just like don't put so much pressure on yourself because you look at the statistics about the number of people who actually graduate from medical school. People do get into their residencies, and then I know people who don't get in residency. It does happen, but they work around it and they maybe reapply. They do a year of research, come back stronger. And so I think people don't need, it can't be like it's all or none because you have options. There's really none of this where like it's an absolute endpoint. If you feel that just doesn't really occur, there's always a way to get where you need to be.
And this is like the, preaching to the choir, but, we're all like smart, high achieving people. And when you're used to always like, you have a plan and it's moving along. And when it doesn't go like exactly how you think you're going to go, I think then a lot of people that like kind of really breaks their world view or
they unravel. And even in medical school going along with that, they're like, a lot of you guys are high achievers, top of the class, valedictorians, all of that. And then you get to medical school and it's a rude awakening because you never struggled on an exam or were in like the pressure cooker and things like that. I know even for me, one of the things that like academically, I'm like, okay, a test is a test. You can prepare for it and you can get nervous about it, but like it's a book test. So it's not like too stressful. However, when we had like our OSCE, that's when you have your standardized patients. That I felt was extremely nerve-wracking, but I'm pretty charismatic. But it was just the fact of doing that experience. And I remember being a first-year medical student, like the first OSCE was like taking the history and doing the blood pressure. And then you see like the upperclassmen and what their OSCE entails, like a whole physical and everything else that they need, and doing their differentials on a patient. You don't know what it is. And you're like, how am I ever going to get to that? And then you get through it and you're like, okay, this is like a walk in the park. Not like the walk in the park, but it's not something that you really stress out about. And it's like, you'll move through things and get where you need to be.
It's a learned process. Everybody puts their pants or their, whatever on one, their shorts on one leg at a time. You're going to get through it. But I think it's the stress and the pressure I think people feel, and a lot of it's self-induced. And, then it can definitely lead to burnout. As one of the few people who I am talking to in these live streams who actually read my book, I mean, what did you feel like maybe was the most useful or the most impactful thing out of the book, if you remember? I think I remember you telling me it was pretty funny. I don't know if
that's what I still remember about it. I like, people might think, okay, drjeffmoody.com, he has his book out there. I'm already busy. There's enough on my plate. You guys just told me that I'm going to be working in EMR, then I'm going to go home pajama time. And now you want me to go read a book? But I think one of the things is that it's not like an academic textbook. There's a lot of, how do I say it? It's funny. It's a very easy read, but extremely informative at the same time too. So you're not going to get bored. You're not going to feel like this action might be something that you're going to look forward to. I have my break. Let me go read this book. And it's something that you're not going to want to put down. So I think that's what really sets it apart, because it's a very congenial, jovial manner, but you're also speaking on a very important subject matter in a way that people can embrace. And it's not like, oh, you need to be a physician to read it. You can be the general population, want to know, okay, what do physicians go through, or your medical student, your resident. It just reaches at all different levels. So I think that's one of the biggest thing, that it's like common sense things in there that you can do, or some people might not consider it common sense, whatever, but it's going to kind of open your eyes to a different perspective, and some of the things to be aware of, some of the things that you weren't aware of, and how do you address it? What can you do moving forward to kind of change the environment?
Well, okay, now you're making my head big. So, but I appreciate that. One question, and I think you had told me at one point, do you feel like this is something like med students would benefit from? Because I wonder if sometimes a med student would think, oh, this is only if you're already a doctor, or you're already in, working or whatever, you finish your residency. And I think you had said, you're like, wow, like I think a lot of medical students should read this, so maybe it should be like required reading.
Yeah, I definitely think it should be, because what is it? Preventive medicine. You want to get to the patient before they have the problems, long-term chronic diseases. And so I think this book is definitely a step in the right direction, because you need to be aware of what's happening before it happens. And as we said, you come into medical school, I don't know off the top of my head the stats on like the medical student versus general population and the risk and incidence of suicide, but I know it's astronomically higher than a general population, even as a medical student. And so that just tells you that there's something, a disconnect or some educational factor that needs to be there, and awareness for medical students, because they are having the burnout, and it's an issue that needs to be addressed. And again, do it earlier as opposed to later, to kind of keep it in the bud.
The way I'll kind of almost think of this is maybe the book would be like a vaccination to a certain extent. Like before you get the disease, like maybe we can kind of fight it off a little bit, or at least again, like you said, like you made the great point, be aware. You got to be aware of it first, then, things can go on. So,
and then going along with that, I think people have to understand like that burnout is normal. It happens, and you can't look at it as a stigma, like I'm the only one going through it, because there's just this culture in medicine, like you got to be the tough person, the last person standing, you're the doctor, you don't have problems, but you're still human. And so a lot of people try to push things to the side. And again, with that competitiveness as like a medical student and younger in your career, you're always trying to move up. And so you feel like, oh, if I talk about like I'm stressed or I'm burnt out, is that a sign of weakness? Is that going to preclude me from getting where I want to be? But no, you need to be aware of this, and you need to recognize it and do things to address that. I think a lot of times there's too much of a stigma attached to it where people feel like they're the only ones going through something. And then once they do reach out or get some resources, like, oh my goodness, I didn't know there were other people going through this. I didn't know there was resources available. There's help. There's others who can really kind of direct me and lead me out of this. So I think that's one thing that's important.
That's a great point, Jason. One thing that I think about is that I wouldn't say that you're necessarily cured per se from burnout, but you kind of almost like recovery. Like, I mean, like like today or yesterday, I was on call last night, and sometimes I'm like, I feel a little burned out when I'm on call, but I'm like, now I know kind of what my reaction is to it, and I can kind of deal with that and mitigate it a little bit. And it's a daily thing. It's a daily struggle. It's a daily battle. But now I feel like I'm more armored up, or I'm more educated about how I can deal with it the best, and I take care of myself better. I'm much more careful with my sleep and my nutrition, lots of stuff. So I wanted to ask you, and I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about what you do, which I think is awesome and unbelievable. And then also kind of like, what's next? What's next for the good Dr. Spears?
All right. So Dr. Spears here. I have a website called drpremed.com. And what I do is basically I help students get into medical school because there's so much information, disinformation, there's rumors, people say you should do this, you shouldn't do that. And I feel like I'm pretty much of a straight shooter, so I'm going to tell you straight and give you your best chance of success for getting into medical school. And so that's what I do. And how I'm a little bit different, it's not one of those things like, oh, I got into medical school, so now I'm qualified to help everybody else get into medical school. Because I think there's a lot of people who just do that. And I always say like a sample size of one doesn't correlate for everybody else. And that's what happened. But in undergrad at Northwestern, I was the president of the Premed Society for my last 2 years. And I was like in that organization throughout my 4 years there. And so through those 4 years, I got to interact with adcoms from the top medical schools throughout the country. And so when I'm advising students, I'm not like, oh, no, this worked for me. I'm like, no, this worked universally throughout the medical community. These are what schools at all different calibers, this is what they're seeking out of applicants. And this is what you need to do to position yourself to successfully get in. Like you can, and like it's, what is it, 2020 now. And so information's out there. That's not the issue that you're going to have as a pre-med. You can find that information, but what you need a system that's packaged and it's going to move you stepwise in the manner that's going to make you outshine the competition. And I tell students, you really need to have a theme to your application because it's so competitive now where just having the MCAT score and the GPA, that's not enough. In the past, what was it? You used to be like, oh, if anybody had like a 3.5 GPA and you scored a 30 on the MCAT, this was the old MCAT system. There's no reason why you shouldn't get into medical school, was what they told applicants. That has totally changed. It's out the window.
The bar keeps getting higher, it seems like.
And everybody has the same stats now. You're going to be competing with people who have higher stats than you. And so you need to be able to distinguish yourself from them. And that's what I help students do. And I tell students, this isn't something that you want to do like, oh, I'm applying to medical school, so let me get help 3 months before. Because everybody's going to know you just padded your resume and probably doing the wrong things to get in. So that's what I help students do at drpremed.com. So that's kind of what I'm doing.
That's awesome. And I, to a certain extent, I hate that. I love that you are an expert and you help med students, pre-med students do this, but I kind of also hate that it's become kind of a game to a certain extent. I love the way that you go about it, where you're like, let's talk about a theme. Let's talk about things that are important to you and activities you can do over long periods of time and show that, like, I'm very environmentally active, and that's really important to me. And I want to serve an underserved,
community,
population. And that's my theme. And you better not do it for a month. You better do it for 2 or 3 years.
Exactly.
And really make that a part of kind of it should be true to you, but then it should come through in the application, I guess.
Exactly.
Is that?
And here's the thing. You have a medical school. They're going to get 10,000 applications. They're only going to interview 1,000 people. And then they're only going to make an offer to maybe about 200 or 300 of those, knowing not everybody's going to matriculate to their school. And so as an AdCom, maybe I'm a physician, so that means I have clinical responsibilities during the day. I'm going to have to attend some other meetings. And then when I get home, I have to sift through these applications. And so you have to think not only from your perspective as a student or as a parent that I want to get my kid in a medical school, or I want to get into medical school, what I want to do. You need to think about their perspective. And that's one of the things I tell students. You need to become what's known as the must-admit applicant, so that when an AdCom looks at your application, they kind of see your theme and it's very apparent what you're going to bring to the school, because then they're going to go back to the committee and say, I had this wonderful applicant. We really need to move forward with them. And
make it easy on them. Make it easy on them, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the big thing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thanks. We did have one question. We had a question from someone who's watching the live stream, and she's the question is, this person is a dietitian, and they're asking, I don't know how much nutrition education physicians get in medical school, and if they did, would they prioritize eating healthy for themselves? And I can tell you, like for me, this was 25 years ago, close to zero. So I don't know, maybe they're better now, but
basically it's pretty much still the same, that you're not getting too much of the nutrition. You do the biochemistry aspect of the LDL, HDL, and all of that. But it's not going to be clinically, you're not going to get too much of that. And then even when you are practicing, the norm is kind of like if you're in hospital, or if you're larger family practice, it's we're going to just refer you to the dietitian or somebody who's
write a consult or a prescription.
Yeah, exactly, is what they're going to do for you. So that's kind of unfortunate that you don't get too much of that experience. I know there's some physicians who do continuing education credits, and they just have that's something that they're passionate about and they want to have more expertise, so they will kind of add that to their credentials, I will actually help with the dietary side of things, nutrition side of it. But for most physicians, that's something that you have to go above and beyond where you're going to be taught and trained in medical school.
One of my friends here in town, internal medicine person, went concierge and now actually has closed her concierge practice and basically does food as medicine, and will go with her clients to the grocery store and help them shop and pick out the right foods. I'm like, wow, that's 9 levels above my education, but I think she finds it very effective for her clients. So that's great.
Yeah, because that's the big thing. You got obesity is a problem in America that needs to be addressed. And it's one of those things where people don't need more information. The information's there. It's about actually implementing and applying it. And so having that physician who's actually going there okay, this is what you need to pick out at the grocery store. These are the reasons why. This is the things that you can do for that, I think is beneficial. And then even, I've watched, reality TV show. They have those
Big Loser or whatever. Yeah.
Those 600-pound people. And what the obesity specialists say, one of the things you need to do is, if you're going to be going healthy, you got to make sure everybody in the household is aware of that, because if somebody is trying to lose weight and maintain a healthy lifestyle, but then you have other people with the ice cream cookies, you can't have it in the house, because there's only so much willpower that people have to say no to those type of things. Exactly.
Well, Jason, Dr. Spears, drpremed.com. I want to be respectful of your time. I think this is our time limit. So I just want to say thank you so much. Thanks for what you've done for me and my kids. Thank you for what you're doing for pre-med students. And I really hope, we can help them get into medical school and then not be burned out, start to get burned out when you get there. So love to continue this conversation. And thanks so much. Any other last questions?
Well, it was a pleasure to be on. I'm very gratified that you even thought to consider me to be on. And so I know people definitely need to visit jeffmoody.com to see everything that you have to really get them to the next level. And even if you're not a physician, you know a physician. Holidays are coming around. Get a book. Give it to the doctor that you know when you're on your office, next time you're your office visit. Hey, doc, I have this for you. This might be something that you want to check out. So that's something that people can do.
Maybe the patient can give the doctor a prescription,
There you go. Exactly.
That's awesome. All right, man. Well, take care. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. Hang out for a minute afterwards, but yeah, so. All right.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks very much, guys. And we'll see you on the next live stream. Remember, you can subscribe so you don't miss any of these. Go to my website, jeffmoody.com, and sign up for the email list. You can pre-order the book there. You can get on our email list. You can get on Facebook. I'm like a bad rash. You can't get rid of me. I'm everywhere. So thanks so much. And we'll see you.